Tom was sitting on the edge of a squashed bed in a cheap motel, twirling his last dollar in his fingers and staring silently at the cracked mirror across the room. The gray hair on his temples, the wrinkles around his eyes, the tired look in his eyes, he barely recognized himself. He once had everything: a house, money, confidence in the future, and a wife he loved, and now, nothing. Ashley took everything away. If you think you have everything under control, you just don't know what will happen next. Tom sighed and opened his old wallet. His credit cards no longer worked, and he only had enough cash for coffee at the nearest diner. But even that wouldn't help wash away the bitter taste in his mouth. The taste of defeat. He used to be a man who made decisions. He built his life from scratch, went through hardships, saved every dollar to create comfort and stability. And he sincerely believed that his wife would always be there for him. But she didn't just leave. She took every Chiang. A few months ago, Tom came home after a hard day, opened the door, and realized something was wrong. The house was empty. The shelves that held her favorite books were empty. Her clothes were gone. Family photos were gone, even his favorite living room chair. There was only one envelope on the kitchen table. I have filed for divorce. The lawyer will explain the details. Don't come looking for me. Tom read the letter dozens of times, but the meaning never changed. She was just gone, without explanation, no warning. He rushed to his bank accounts, and that's where the real blow hit him. All the money was gone, and she had managed to transfer it before she disappeared. His lawyer, dry and emotionless, just threw up his hands. Your wife registered part of the assets for herself several years ago. You signed the documents yourself. And Tom couldn't believe it. He trusted her. She managed the finances because it was more convenient. He worked, and she supposedly took care of their welfare. And now he had nothing left. No savings, no property. Even the car was in her name. I'm sorry, Mr. Blake, but you're out of options. These words put the final nail in the coffin of his former life. For the first week, Tom tried to fight. He went to the bank to his friends, and even turned to his former partners. On a butt when you are old, without money, without influence, without a home, no one wants to deal with you. A month later, he was living in cheap motels, counting every dollar. In 2 months, he was selling things to make ends meet. After 3, he was sitting here in a dark room, asking himself what's next. Tom was not weak. He was not going to give up. But one evening, sitting on a bench at a roadside diner, he suddenly realized that the fear that had tormented him all his life had become a reality. He was alone, without money, without a future. But at that very moment, when it seemed that things couldn't get any worse, fate decided to give him another blow. The phone, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly lit up in the dark. And the name that appeared on the screen made his heart sink. It was her, his ex-wife. Why was she calling? What more could she want? Tom took a breath, pressed the button to accept the call. He had no idea that this call would change everything. Tom used to live a life that many people only dream of. He had a spacious house in a quiet suburb, where trees shaded the yard and his neighbors greeted each other with genuine sincerity. He always had a brand new car in his driveway and a few expensive tools in his garage that he rarely used, but which reminded him that life was good. He was a man who worked all his life, first as a loader, then as a handyman, and then as the owner of a small repair company. The work was hard, but it brought a steady income. His wife, Linda, was his pride. Slender, well-groomed, always smiling, she looked as if her life consisted only of pleasant moments. And it was true. She didn't work, she never needed to. Tom earned enough so that she could do what she liked and go to salons, choose expensive dresses, drink coffee with friends in prestigious cafes. It seemed to him that everything in his life was going right. But when everything seems perfect, it only means that the storm has not yet begun. Every morning Tom started the same way. He would wake up early, even before the sun tinted the sky pink, drink a cup of coffee, get in the car, and drive to work. He loved this moment when the world is still sleeping and you are already on your feet, ready for a new day. Linda woke up much later. Her day started with yoga followed by a shower, a light breakfast, and then Saylan's shopping and meetings with friends. She loved beautiful things, expensive accessories, and traveling. Tom never denied her any of this. He believed that a man should provide his woman with the best. If I have the opportunity, why not? He often told his friends when they wondered how much money he spent on his wife. And indeed, why not? He had the money. But there was one caveat: Linda controlled all the finances. Honey, why do you have to worry about the bills? I'm better at it. She laughed when Tom tried to look into the family budget. And he believed her. Why shouldn't he? Sometimes something seemed strange to him. For example, when he received notices in the mail about loans he knew nothing about. Or when he noticed that he had less money in his accounts than he should have. But Linda always found an explanation. It's just a bank mistake. I'll fix it, don't worry, she would say, kissing him lightly on the cheek. And Tom wasn't worried. Why should he worry if everything was so good? The summer of that year was warm. Tom bought Linda a new car, and they went on vacation, an expensive resort, a luxury hotel, dinners in the best restaurants. He looked at his wife and thought he was a lucky man. If only he knew that in reality, all this was just an illusion. One evening they were sitting on the veranda of their house. Linda was wearing a light silk dressing gown, with a glass of wine in her hands. She was smiling, saying something about a new collection of designer handbags. Darling, I was thinking, why don't we buy a house by the ocean? She suddenly said, sliding her fingers along his arm. Tom smiled. He could never say no to her. But the next day, his life changed forever. Because the next morning he woke up to find Linda gone. Along with his money, along with everything they had, and all that was left was a note on his desk. Don't come looking for me. Tom stood in his bedroom, completely devastated. The bed was made as if Linda had gotten up as usual. But her dresses were gone from the closet. No makeup on the dressing table. And only the subtle scent of her perfume still hung in the air, as if mocking him. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a short note on the kitchen table. Don't look for me. And that was it. What do you mean, don't look for me? What do you mean she just disappeared? He rushed to the phone and tried to call her. The rings went on, but no one answered. He tried again, and again, still nothing. His heart was pounding as if it was about to jump out of his chest. He ran to the safe in the closet. Linda knew the code, and that was his biggest mistake. The safe was empty. The cash, important documents, even the wedding ring he had kept there in case she wanted a new ring, were all gone. Tom no longer felt the floor under his feet. He rushed to check his bank accounts. He opened the app and froze. The account that had tens of thousands yesterday now showed zero. Another account was in the red. My credit card was blocked because I had exceeded the limit. No, this can't be. He whispered as if it could change reality, but it didn't. It was real. Linda hadn't just left. She had cleaned out every last cent. Tom had always thought he was in control. But it seems that all along she was in control. She was in charge of finances, knew all the passwords, all the accounts, all his habits. She was preparing for this in advance. He felt sick. He sat down on a chair and tried to collect his thoughts. Why? Why did she do this? He thought they were happy. He believed in their life, in their love, and she just erased him from the world map like a mistake. Tom remembered all the strange moments he had ignored. The sudden loans that appeared in the bank. Her evasive answers when he asked about money. Her new car, new jewelry, trips with friends who never seemed suspicious to him. She was living large. But he thought they could afford it. Except she wasn't just spending his money. She was planning for this moment. She was preparing to escape. Tom gritted his teeth. He wanted to scream. He was furious. He was devastated. But most importantly, he couldn't just let it go. He was not the kind of man who could be robbed and just throw up his hands. He would find her. And then what? He didn't know yet. But what one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. Tom sat in the darkness of his living room, staring at the bottle of whiskey on the table. It was almost empty, just like his life now. Yesterday, he had everything. Today, he was penniless and heartbroken. He spent the whole day on the phone with the bank, creditors, and the police. But what could they do? You gave your wife access to the accounts yourself. The bank consultant replied coldly. We can't do anything unless the fact of fraud is proven. The police officer said, not even trying to hide her indifference. Tom was alone. He tried to act quickly. I pulled up old financial documents and looked at bank statements. The money was slipping away like water through his fingers. Linda had taken out loans in his name. Tens of thousands in debt. She had even sold off his personal belongings. He found an ad for a watch he had inherited from his father, and worst of all, his house was now in jeopardy as well. Oh, God, he whispered, pressing his fingers to his temples. He was not a young man who could just start over. He was in his 50s. Find a new high-paying job. At his age, he had worked for himself for most of his life, and now his business, a small repair company, was on the verge of bankruptcy. Customers were not paying on time, and without money he could not pay for materials. When he called the office, his accountant, Lori, was blunting, Tom, we're in trouble. If we don't get some revenue soon, we're going to have to close. He tried calling his friends. But all the conversations were the saming. Tom, I heard about your situation. I'm sorry, but I can't help you right now. Even those he had helped in the past had turned their backs on him now. Annie, it's amazing how quickly people disappear when you're in trouble. He hadn't eaten for 2 days. He had no appetite. He did not sleep. His eyes were red and his hands were shaking with fatigue and tension. When he went outside, he realized that he didn't even have money for gasoline. His cards didn't work. He had no cash. And then a wave of panic hit him. He couldn't get enough air. He leaned on the wall of the house, trying to breathe. Pull yourself together, he whispered to himself. But how? His life was falling apart before his eyes. Tom was not the type to give up. He knew he had to act. First, he had to find Linda. She couldn't just disappear into thin air. He started checking her social media, their mutual friends, the accounts she used. And suddenly a trace. A transaction from his old credit card that he had forgotten to close. A hotel in Las Vegas. He sighed. He had found it. Now he just had to solve the main question. Tom woke up on the old couch in his studio. The cold dawn was breaking through the dirty window, casting dim rays on the wooden floor. He stirred, feeling the pain in his back. Yesterday he had a comfortable bed, but today he had to sleep wherever he had to. He had once had everything: home, business, stability. And now, not a dollar left in his pocket. His old life had vanished like smoke. The phone rang. Tom stood up with difficulty and picked up the phone. Tom, it's Lori, his accountant. What is it? He mumbled, even though he already knew the answer. It's over, she said in a steady voice. The company is closed. The creditors won't wait. He sat down silently on the edge of the couch. His business, what he had built for decades, it was closed. When he hung up the phone, he felt as if another part of his soul had been ripped out of him. Tom could not go home. That home no longer existed. Legally, the house still belonged to him, but Linda paid the bills. And now that she had disappeared, everything was in the hands of the bank. They left him a message. You have 3 days to move out. After that, the property will be put up as collateral. He went to the house, hoping to take something away. But it was empty inside. He walked through the rooms, each step echoing in the empty space. Linda took not only the money, actually took furniture, appliances, even the old sofa in the living room. And do you know what was the worst part? She left a photo, their wedding photo, thrown in the middle of the floor, like a mockery. His stomach was clenching with hunger, but he didn't even have money for a cheap burger. He would go into a coffee shop, inhale the aroma of fresh pastries, and leave because he couldn't even afford a cup of coffee. He stood outside the store, watching people buy food and throw small coins into the soda machine. And then something happened that he never thought would happen. He saw a man throw in a dollar bill, but the machine didn't accept it, so he just walked away. Tom leaned over and took the dollar. God damn it! He was ashamed of himself. He, a grown man who once earned tens of thousands a month, was now rejoicing at $1 like a hungry dog. But what could he do? Life had thrown him to the bottom. He decided to turn to people he once considered friends. Dude, I wish I could help, but I'm going through a hard time right now. Some said. You know I can't give you money for nothing. Others replied. His phone calls were ignored. Those who had recently been drinking expensive whiskey with him in restaurants were now not even responding to his messages. And then he remembered the hotel in Las Vegas. Linda was there. Now he knew for sure. But how to get there? He had no money for a ticket. He did the only thing he could. He sold the last thing he had left, his tools. These tools had supported him for decades. But now, he took them to a pawn shop for a pitiful few $100s. When he left there, he felt like a nobody. But he had a purpose, and he had nothing left to lose. His next stop was Las Vegas. The phone rang at the most unexpected moment. The number was unfamiliar. Tom did not realize that this call would change everything. He was riding a cheap bus to Las Vegas, trying not to think about what he had left behind. His life had turned to rubble, but there was still hope ahead to find Linda and at least understand why she had done this to him. He still had some money in his pocket. Enough to get to the city, but no more. Tom had no plan, only an obsession. The phone in his pocket vibrated. He looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. He hesitated for a moment, but finally pressed answer. Hello, Tom. Voice on the other end of the line was low, familiar, but long forgotten. He tried to remember. It was Steve McKay. And then it hit him. Steve was an old friend of his. They had once started a business together. But they'd parted ways years ago, Tom wanting an honest business and Steve always playing by the rules. Damn, Steve. I never thought I'd hear your voice again. I've been watching you, man. I've been watching you come up, and now. He paused. I hear things are going to hell for you. Tom clenched his jaw. He didn't need this conversation. So what? You want to laugh? No, I want to help you. Tom laughed, bitter nervous. And what can you offer me? Steve was silent for a few seconds, then setting a job. Tom squinted skeptically. And what kind of work is that? It's a long conversation. Steve answered evasively. But let me tell you this, I have some business in Las Vegas, and I'm looking for someone I can trust. Why me? Tom asked incredulously. Because you're backed into a corner. You have nowhere to go. Tom clenched his fist. Damn it, Steve. Don't be so quick to answer. I'll meet you in Las Vegas. I'll set up a place. If you don't show up, no problem. But if you do, maybe I can help you get out of this. Tom didn't say anything. Think about it, buddy. And I'll see you, Steve said and hung up. Tom stared out the bus window, watching the endless desert stretch out on the horizon. His only goal was to find Linda. But now he had another option. Steve was not a good guy. His business was always on the edge of the law. But now Tom couldn't afford to be too careful with his options. His thoughts were interrupted by the driver's announcement. Las Vegas in 15 minutes. Tom exhaled a breath. He had to make a choice. Las Vegas was shining with neon, and Tom stood on the sidewalk, feeling the past catching up with him. He had two choices: follow the ghost of his former life, or take a step into the unknown. Tom stepped off the bus and immediately felt the hot air of Las Vegas burn his skin. He hadn't been here in years. This city had once promised him success, but now it reminded him of everything he had lost. His phone vibrated. A message from Stevie. Meet me at the Golden Lounge. Don't be late. Tom looked around. He had some money in his pocket, enough for a cheap motel and dinner. But did he really want to go this way? Eek. Golden Lounge was not the same place Tom remembered. It had once been a respectable bar, but now it was a dingy den where those who didn't want to ask questions hung out. He walked in, and his eyes gradually adjusted to the dim lighting. Steve was sitting in the corner, with a glass of whiskey and the same smug expression Tom remembered. "Buddy." Steve raised his glass. "I knew you'd come." Then Tom sat down across from him. "I didn't say I agreed." Steve laughed. "Then why are you here?" Tom didn't have an answer. "Listen," Steve said, leaning closer. "I know you're going through a lot right now. I've seen get ripped off. But I can help you get it all back." "How exactly?" Steve smiled. "There's a little something I can do. Nothing illegal." "Well, almost. Just helping an old friend." Tom sighed. "And what kind of help is that?" Steve took a photo out of his pocket and put it on the table. Tom looked at it and his heart sank. It was Linda in the photo. "What the hell is this?" Tom cried out. Steve leaned back in his chair. "Linda is in town right now. And I have some information you might need." Tom felt his fists clench. "What do you know about her?" Steve smiled. "And she plays in the big leagues. And she's not alone." Tom was silent. "There's a guy," Steve continued. "Big player. Very rich. He's paying for her, and for a reason." The blood froze in my veins. "You say you want answers. I can give them to you," Steve said. "But everything has a price." Tom looked at Linda's photo. The past had returned, and now he had to decide whether to run away again or find out the truth. Tom held Linda's photo in his hands. The past he had tried to forget was standing before him again. She lived her life, and he survived. But now he had a chance to change everything. The only question was it worth it? Tom sat at a table in the Golden Lounge looking at Steve. The bar was filled with people, and he sat there as if between two worlds. What do you want?" Tom asked dryly. Steve smiled. "To help you, old friend. I know you haven't forgiven Linda. I know you want justice." Tom took a deep breath. "If she's in the big game, as you say, what do you suggest?" Steve leaned closer. "I can give you information, whatever you need to understand how she lives. But in return—" "That's right." Tom interrupted. "There's always a in return." Steve twirled his whiskey glass in his hands. There's this guy. He's too sure of himself. He thinks he can screw people over any way he wants. He owes me money, and I know you can help." Tom felt anger boiling inside him. "I'm not your debt collector." Steve laughed. No, you just need to scare him. He's hanging out at the casino, spending other people's money. You're a good reader, Tom. Just observe him, see what he's falling for. And then it's a matter of technique." Tom rubbed his face. "Elena, and if I do that, will you give me information about Linda?" Steve nodded. "All her secrets." Tom looked at the photo. His hands were shaking. The Mirage Casino greeted him with bright lights and the smell of expensive cigars. And then Tom took a deep breath and walked in. He had once been a part of this world. He knew how the game worked. He knew how to read people, how to spot weaknesses. He quickly found the man he was looking for. A young man in an expensive suit, a cheeky smile, two women laughing at his every word. "Here he is," Steve said quietly as he approached. "Meet Ricky Henderson." Tom looked at him. "What do you want me to do?" "I'm to find out what he's afraid of." "We'll figure it out from there." Tom sat down nearby and began to watch. Ricky was playing poker. He was betting big, laughing lightly. He pretended to be confident, but Tom could see the small details, the way his hand twitched, the way he tried to hide his excitement. He needed fast money. An hour later, Tom had his answer. He's afraid of losing. He's not playing with his own money. Steve smiled. "That's great. Then we need to make him feel like he's losing everything." Tom looked at him. "If I do that, will you do your part?" Steve nodded. Tom closed his eyes. His life was entering a dark streak again. Tom never thought he would be at a crossroads again. Yesterday he was just surviving, but today he was faced with cards that could change everything. However, every choice has its price. Tom stood at the window of his small apartment, watching the lights come on in the evening city. His mind was racing with thoughts. She lived her life while I was bleeding to death, and now I have a chance to even the score." He whispered to himself. Steve gave him information about Linda, about her new life, the money she got after divorce, and even some of her secrets. But at the same time, Tom got involved in a game that is not easy to get out of. The next night, he found himself back at the Mirage. Everything was the same as before: loud laughter, clinking chips, tension in the air. Ricky Henderson was sitting at the same table, but now his confidence was shaken. Tom sat at the next table, watching him. Ricky had lost, once again, and then again. His nerves were giving out. As Steve leaned over to Tung, he could already sense that something was wrong. All he had to do was push him. Tom clenched his fists. "And what do you do next?" You walk up to him, offer to help. He's hooked, but Tom didn't like to do dirty things. But this time it was different. He knew what he would get in return. Ricky walked out onto the casino terrace looking furious, clutching his phone. Tom took a few steps toward him. "A rough night, huh?" Ricky glared at him. "What's up with you?" Tom laughed. "I just see that you could really use a friend right now." Ricky turned to him. "If you're talking about money, forget it." "It's not about money. I'm talking about opportunities." Ricky's eyes narrowed. "I'm listening." Tom moved closer. "I know you're not gambling with your money, and I know you need a plan. If you do this right, you'll get away with it." Ricky swallowed. "What are you suggesting?" Tom had two choices: either help Steve get this guy into more trouble or warn him. He needed the truth about Linda, but was it worth it? He looked at Ricky. He was scared, young, stupid, but not completely spoiled yet. And Tom's inner voice screamed, "Stop!" But the voice of revenge whispered, "Go on." Tom made a choice. He smiled and said, "You have one last chance. Don't waste it." Ricky looked at him in surprise, but something in Tom told him that the boy had understood him correctly. Now all they had to do was wait to see what would happen next. It all came down to this moment. Mama Tom had been through hell to get here. He had lost everything, and now he had a chance to get his justice. But the last blow had to be accurate. Everything depended on it. Tom stood in front of the mirror in his room. His eyes were filled with fatigue, but his determination pulsated inside. His phone was on the table, and a message from Steve was on the screen. "Everything is ready. We're waiting for you." Tom took a deep breath. Don't know if this was his chance, his moment. When he entered the Mirage Casino, he felt everything inside him shrink. His fate would be decided here. Ricky was already waiting. He looked nervous. His hands were shaking, his eyes were darting. "Well?" Tom asked, sitting down next to him. Ricky swallowed. "I did what you said." But they started to suspect something. Tom gritted his teeth. "Who's they?" Ricky turned around nervously. "A security. The casino owner. I don't know how much time we have." Tom glanced at Steve, who was standing at the bar. He nodded back. Everything was going according to plan. Steve walked over and whispered quickly, "It's time to act." Tom looked at Ricky. "If you want to get out of here in one piece, just do what I say." Ricky nodded, although it was clear that fear was paralyzing him. Tom got up and walked over to the gaming table. The big players were gathered there, those who were betting thousands. It took him only a few minutes to pull off his plan. The croupier nodded to him as he dealt the cards. Tom looked at his hand. "Let's play." The game continued. Everything was going according to plan. But suddenly Tom noticed that the two guards came closer. They were clearly interested in him and Ricky. He leaned forward, whispering to Stevie, "We've been spotted." Steve gritted his teeth. A stall for time. But there was no more time. Suddenly, one of the guards picked up a radio and said something into it. Tom realized it was all or nothing. He got up from the table and looked at Ricky. "Let's go." Ricky didn't hesitate when they quickly moved toward the exit, trying to stay calm. When they were a few meters from the door, one of the guards shouted, "Stop!" Tom didn't hesitate any longer. He grabbed the nearest chair and threw it to the floor, creating chaos. Ricky rushed forward, and Tom ran after him. Outside, Steve was already waiting for them, sitting in his car with the engine running. Tom and Ricky jumped in, and the car took off. The guards ran after them, but it was too late. Tom exhaled. Or did we make it? Steve smiled. Not yet, but you're on the right track. Tom looked at Ricky. How about you? Ricky lowered his head. You gave me a chance. I don't know what's next. Tom smiled. None of us do. But it's better than living a lie. There were still many roads ahead. But one thing he knew for sure was that he would never be the same person again. The past does not just disappear. It comes back at the most unexpected moments. And when it seems that everything is behind you, fate throws you cards again that you did not expect to see. Tom sat on the balcony of an old motel, clutching his phone. Wind was blowing dust down the street, and the streetlights flickered dimly. He was going over the events of the last few days in his head. Had he won? Or had he lost? Ricky had disappeared. After that night at the casino, he had simply evaporated. He didn't answer his phone, didn't get in touch. Steve said it was normal. That's his style, he muttered as he tuned the radio in the car. But Tom knew something was wrong. When he got to the parking lot, Steve was already waiting for him by the car. What now? Tom asked, throwing his bag into the trunk. Steve was silent for a long time and then said, You should forget about all this. So do you. Tom smiled, though he felt all tense inside. Steve sighed. Some things are better left behind. Tom didn't say anything. He knew he couldn't leave anything behind. As they drove out of town, Tom's phone vibrated. The number was unknown. He didn't want to answer it, but something inside made him press the button. Hi, Tom, said a familiar voice. Tom clutched the phone in his hand. Ricky, we're not done, he said calmly. Steve looked at Tom, sensing the tension. What did he want? Tom didn't know what to say. He didn't even know what to say to himself, because the past had just knocked on his door, and this time there was no escaping it.